Quinn. On Friday nights, there were always only two things on my mind: getting the hell out of the house and finding the party. But before I could get my buzz on with Guzzo and Dwyer, I had to take care of Willie. Ma used to want me to stay home with him, but thank God that didn't last long because the Cambys, our family friends a few blocks away, came to the rescue and invited Willie for their spaghetti and movie nights. So Friday afternoons, I just needed to get his bag packed and get him over there. He could do it all himself. He was in seventh grade, for God's sake. But Ma hammered me with, Quinn, you need to take some responsibility. If she wasn't actually in my face or over my shoulder across the room, sour frowning as she said it, that she was a voice in my head, making sure I knew she was there. As usual, Willie beat me home. He left the door wide open. He was too old to act like a freaking wild animal, but he was the baby of the family, and we still treated him like one. He was in the living room with the PlayStation. His life's major achievement was the mastery of all games and how quickly he beat them. His latest was the new version of Grand Theft Auto. Ma hated the game. But when Willie agreed to play soccer, the deal he cut, the little prince, was that he could play GTA as often as he wanted. Whatever. Willie was all charm. He got what he wanted. Whenever he smiled, I was sure he put tears in Mrs. Canby's eyes, which was why they adopted him every Friday night. Fuck yeah! Willie yelled, because he knew it was me walking into the living room, not Ma. On the screen, he blasted someone away with a handgun. He'd stolen a cop car and was cruising through the streets. I knew this part. Soon he'd find the helicopter and go blow up more shit in his virtual world. I hated to admit it, but the game kind of freaked me out. Hey, I shouted. Turn that down. People will think I'm beating you or something. You packed? He bobbed his head to the soundtrack and ignored me. Willie. Will now. It sounds tougher. Tough Will. I will kick your ass if you don't get your bag packed now. No, you won't. He still had his back to me, and I snuck up behind him slowly. No, you won't, because if you do, I'll tell Ma, and she will kick your ass. Maybe, I said, pretzeling his arm behind his head, but it will be worth it. He whined and kicked at my shins, but I lifted him from the floor by the TV and dragged him like that across the room until we were by the couch, where I dropped him face first. I got a knee on his back. You had enough? His face reddened. Enough? I pressed harder. He wasn't in pain, smooshed into the cushions of the couch like that. He was just pissed he couldn't free himself. He wanted me to hurt him. He was that stubborn. If I hurt him, he could hurt me with a week's deep shit with Ma. Thing is, I tackled him once, 2 years earlier. He was in 5th grade and I was in 10th. I misjudged the distance, and as we fell, his head hit the corner of the coffee table. I called the ambulance myself. I got him to the hospital myself. He needed stitches. It was after dinner, so Ma was already at work. I didn't want to call her. I didn't want to bother her. I just wanted to take care of my brother and fix everything before she came home the next morning. But they called her as soon as we got to the hospital, and when she got there, she gave me the 3rd degree right there in front of everybody. Hell of a bawling. I didn't blame her. We all have our roles to play since Dad died. Plus, now it was a story Willie'd bring up at the kitchen table if he wanted to get out of what I told him he needed to do. For example, eat your green beans. Why? You have to. It's healthy. What if I don't? You gonna smash my face again? You're not my dad. No, I wasn't a stand-in for Dad. Nobody could be that. When the IED got him in Afghanistan, he became an instant saint in Springfield. I wasn't him. I'd never be him. But I was still supposed to try. That was my role, the dutiful son, the all-American boy with an all-American 15-foot dead-eye jump shot and an all-American 3.5 GPA. But sometimes trying to get Willie ready and out the door was an all-American pain in the ass. I got my knee off his back and lifted him from the couch. Come on, Will, I said. Please, I got to get going. Get your bag packed. I made a big production of catching his breath and calming down, and then he stomped off to our room. As soon as I heard him banging drawers and looking for his uniform for his soccer game, I went to the kitchen for my own bit of packing. That was another part of the Friday night routine. I always swiped a flask full of Ma's bourbon. She needed it to fall asleep when she got back from her shift over at the Uline warehouse. 12 hours straight, so who could blame her? I took it to ignite my Friday night buzz. Me, Guzzo, and Dwyer. We got our drink on to get our party on. Weekend warriors to the end. But I always stole the booze without Willie knowing either. And I got the flask in my jacket pocket while he searched for his shin pads in our room. He couldn't see me taking the booze. His eyes were Ma's eyes, were the eyes of all the jackholes in Springfield who looked at me and thought of Dad. Apparently, I had his eyes, his build, his all American looks. All American? What the hell was that? I hated that shit. What did it even mean? I doubled back into the living room and turned off the game and TV. I checked the house and the lights and all that. Responsible. That's me. Ready? I yelled. Yeah, Willie said. You good, tough Will? Don't call me that. I thought you wanted to be called that, asshole. All right, let's go. Once we were outside, I locked up and we were heading down the sidewalk. I threw my arm over his shoulder. He didn't shrug it off, which surprised me, but I was glad for it. I wasn't his dad, or any dad, but I did love being a brother, and I did love the little pain in my ass. But I didn't love having to walk into the Cambies. Take some responsibility. Ma never said that to him. He could walk his own damn self. He was 12, not 5. It wasn't far either, but Ma and the Cambies were paranoid about the 2-block stretch between our houses. Supposedly, the neighborhood was going to shit, and supposedly Sal Canby got chased by a few kids all the way home one day after school, and Mrs. Canby had to threaten to call the police to get them off her front porch. Frankly, I'd seen Sal acting like an ass so many times with Willie, he probably said something and was so dumb about it that he didn't realize it'd get him chased in the first place. The kid was an idiot sometimes, but whatever. I was glad he was friends with Willie because the Cambys were nice as hell. They fed Willie every Friday night and made him part of their family, and all that kindness got me off the hook from babysitting so I could hang out like everybody else I knew did. Everyone in this neighborhood lives in multifamily buildings. We live on the second floor of ours, above old Mr. and Mrs. Langone, for good rent, Ma says. But the Cambys own their entire building, which, they said, was why they stayed. Otherwise, they would have moved a long time ago. I didn't have to be a parent worrying about rent and electric bills and all that shit to know that when you live in a neighborhood where they don't fix the streetlights very often, where cops set up one of those elevated lookout stations around the corner and patrol the streets a lot more than they used to when I was little, the neighborhood was on the decline. But I love the West Side. I lived here my whole life. What the hell did people really mean when they said the West Side was on the decline? What did that say about the people who lived here, like me, or all the damn people who are moving here now? When we got to the Cambys, Willie sprinted up the front steps. I hung back. He rang the bell, and Mrs. Canby answered the door. Willie dashed past her, and Mrs. Canby waved to me from the doorway. She wore slippers. I stayed right where I was on the sidewalk, not wanting to get too close, not wanting to get roped into staying longer than I had to, just wanting to get the hell out and get the party started for the night. But Mrs. Canby beckoned me, like usual. You know, you're always welcome, too. She leaned against the frame and held the door open. I could smell the sizzling garlic and onions from the street. I don't remember the last time Ma had cooked for us. Thanks, I said. I'm good. I have things to do. Busy man, of course you do. And I wouldn't want to crash Willie's time with his friends. It's never crashing when either of you are at our place, Quinn. You know that. Thanks again, Mrs. Canby. Regina. Call me Regina. Mrs. Canby was Joe's mother. She smiled, and it was that smile I saw too often. That proud pity for St. Springfield's 2 sons. You're a good kid, Quinn, she told me. I nodded and made my way. That stuff just pissed me off. The world was shitty. And I didn't care if that sounded melodramatic. It was. Yeah, I was a good kid, a model kid. My dad had been the model man, the guy who, when he was on leave, stood there behind the table at St. Mary's Soup Kitchen in his pressed Class A blues, serving ladle after ladle of chicken soup he'd helped make. Yeah, model man when he lived, model man after he died, the model man and the model family he left behind. My dad got blown up in Afghanistan, and Ma and everybody we knew, and plenty of people we didn't know but knew his name, all reminded me he sacrificed for all of us. He sacrificed for the good of our country. He died in the name of freedom. He died to prove to the wackos of the world who didn't believe in democracy, liberal economy, civil rights, and all that shit that we were right and they were wrong. But for me, my dad was dead. So the friggin' wackos won. And seriously, who are the friggin' wackos anyway? I sure as hell didn't feel sane all the time. Dwyer and Guzzo had been texting me since I got home, and I knew they were waiting for me in the alley near Jerry's corner store. When I was a block away, I took a quick swig of bourbon and stuffed the flask in my ass pocket so they'd know I had it. So they'd know I wanted to get the party started too, but I'd had shit to do. I took a swig because I was taking responsibility. By the time I got to them, they were pissed, and they looked like a couple of old ladies bent over and gossiping. Dwyer with his hands thrust in his pockets, shuffling back and forth on his 2 feet, his skinny arms and legs all fidgety, trying to hide his big ass head beneath a green hoodie, and typical Guzzo. Guy's built like a bear, but he stood there with his hands on his hips, thumbs forward, kicking at the edge of the dumpster like he was checking a tire for air. He threw his hand up when he noticed me. "What the hell?" he said. "Dude, we've just been sitting here," Dwyer said, wiping at the buzz-cut stubble around his head. "Someone's going to get suspicious." "No one's going to get suspicious," I told them. "We scored beer here more times than I can count." "Whatever," Guzzo said. "This is our last night out for months. Next week, it's back to hell." "It's not hell," Dwyer said. "Dude, I hate forced fun," Guzzo continued. "Coach isn't fooling anyone with his team building shit. Basketball meetings every Friday and Saturday night mean one thing: no goddamn partying. That's it." "Man," Dwyer said, giving Guzzo that face that said, "You dumb or what?" "You kill me. This is serious. When that scout from Duke shows up, you're going to be the first in line, squeezing his palm, all stupid smiles and clean cut." "No, he won't," I said. I bounced in between them and boxed Guzzo back into the dumpster, keeping my ass low, legs spread. "I'll get there first. Hey, man," I'll tell him. "People tell me I look good in blue." I flashed a big fake smile and Dwyer laughed. Guzzo pushed at me, and I held my ground, keeping him pinned, but he's huge, and it didn't take long for him to toss me aside. He swung around in front of me, frowned. "Fuck that," he said. "You know damn well English is going to be first in line because everybody's going to talk to him first." "Not if you step in there," Dwyer told Guzzo. He bounced Guzzo with his shoulder, and they went at it for a few seconds, trying to get position on each other, get a leg in front, and box the other one's back. Dwyer's tall, but he's all sticks, and Guzzo popped Dwyer's leg with his knee and got in front. He grinned. "Whose house?" he said to me. I laughed. I started bobbing in front of him like I was going to shake and move past him to some hoop behind him. "Oh, yeah," I said, dribbling my pretend basketball. "Falcons all the way, baby!" Dwyer yelled from behind Guzzo. "Whose house? Our house!" His cheeks were already so red his freckles seemed to gather all together. Guzzo, squatting, his arms spread out and keeping Dwyer behind him, nodded. "Hell yeah," he said. Then he stopped and stood up and let Dwyer rush past him. Dwyer came at me so quickly I thought he was going to knock me over. He dipped, pivoted, and swung around me like he was going up for an easy layup behind me. Classic Dwyer. He loved banging in the paint like a giant pinball and fighting for the rim. Guzzo wasn't as much of a fighter. He was just massive. People bounced off him more than he tried to send them flying. Still, we laughed, but it was because it was all we thought about. It was all everybody was thinking about. It was mid-November. State rankings came out in 2 weeks. If we were number one, it was only going to get harder. "Listen," I said, "if this is our last big night, let's make it worth it." "That's what I'm talking about," Guzzo said, slapping my hand in the air. He pulled a short key on a ring from his pocket and held it in the air like a cartoon superhero. "Shotgun, baby!" he yelled. It was so loud. Dwyer looked around to see if anybody was watching us from the top of the alley. "Seriously," Guzzo continued, "how much are we going to get? I'm shotgunning like 10 beers tonight." By we, Guzzo meant me, because I usually had more cash than either of them, so I almost always bought the beer, which pissed me off, but I knew they felt bad I paid for their fun more than they paid for mine. And fuck it, we were tight. And that was most important. I've been friends with Guzzo forever, and when Dwyer had joined us in middle school, everything had only gotten better. "I have this," I said, patting my back pocket, knowing they could smell it on my breath. "And I don't want to be wasted when I get to Jill's, and you can't be either. You promised me. Seriously." And that was the other reason I didn't mind buying Guzzo beer. Jill was Guzzo's cousin, and he kept promising he was going to put in a good word for me with her. I'd always liked her. Gearing up for the basketball season, I would go on these epic runs all around town, and I admit it, I'd run by her house more than once. You know how it is. Sometimes you just want to cross paths with that one person on the bus, on the street, wherever, just so you can nod and say, "What's up?" and hope to hell that something more comes of it. Anyway, the last time I'd seen her, she was dragging her younger brother across the street. She'd been wearing these stupid gray sweatpants rolled at the waist, rolled at the ankles, too. She walked barefoot along the walkway. I waved to her. She waved back. And all I could think was, how does she make even a stupid pair of sweatpants look so good? Everybody knew she threw mad parties, so I was psyched for the night. Everybody'd be hands up dancing on the first floor, and I'd see if Jill was down with some alone time. And if not, that was cool too, because then I'd be ripping shots with Goots and Dwyer in the kitchen, like we did at most parties anyway. "Well, let's do this," Gutso said. "Jerry's, beer, a couple of slices at Mother's, and we're good. The party's gonna be a shit show. Frankie brought over a friggin' trunk full." Frankie was another one of Gutso's cousins, and this was another reason being friends with Gutso was a good thing. He had an army of cousins around the city, and if you were in the shit and you were tight with Gutso, you didn't have to look far for help. Basically, we always got started at Jerry's because it was the dirtiest little corner store I knew and the easiest place for us to get beer. Gutso had lifted a bottle once. I had too, but we didn't try that anymore, and we never bought it ourselves. The clerks behind the counter would never risk selling to underage dudes. But one night, I asked the guy on the sidewalk outside if he'd buy us a 12-pack of tall boys. He agreed, and that had become our weekly routine. It was the safest plan anyway, and we always seemed to find someone who'd buy the beer for us. The only problem was this: whoever we found to buy us the beer would only do it if we paid him extra. There weren't any good Samaritan beer angels floating around waiting to gift us our weekly Friday buzz. So beer cost double for us, but whatever, we were 17. And I made mint at my summer job, and it gave me play money for the year. Plus, Ma was a freaking workhorse, always doing the night shift at Uline so she could get paid more. It meant the money I made was just for me and whatever I wanted to spend on Willie. But mostly it went for beer and Friday night dinners at the back window of Mother's Pizza. We had to hang around for a while, but soon after it was actually dark out. I left Gutsu and Dwyer in the alley and leaned up against the brick wall down the block from Jerry's until I saw a guy making his way up 4th Street toward us. I recognized him. He'd helped us out before. He was a skinny white dude who was a little strung out. I told myself that the guy looked like he could use my money to buy himself some food, but he's going to buy more beer anyway. And while I'm fucking judging the guy like that, I'm also digging in my pocket for the money I'm about to give him to buy me and the guys our beer at 5:30 in the goddamn afternoon. See what I mean? Who's the sane one now? I'm thinking all this, but on the outside, I was all smiles and handshakes, all American. And I was about to hand him my money when the front door to Jerry's whacked open and a cop pushed a younger guy out in front of him. It was only a matter of seconds before the cop had thrown the guy to the sidewalk and pressed him face first into the concrete. I was barely 20 feet away. The guy on the ground was black, and he looked like he was around my age, and I wasn't sure, but I thought he was looking at me. He was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. Did he go to our school? All I could really see was the cop over him shouting. The cop was white, and it took me a second to recognize him because his face was angled down the whole time. But then he raised his head for a second. I realized right away it was Gutso's older brother, Paul. Holy shit, Paul. Paul was hitting the other guy again and again, smashing his face into the sidewalk. The blood kept coming. I wanted to move. My gut wanted me to rush to help Paul, but I knew enough to know that you stayed out of police business. Plus, Paul didn't need my help because he was pummeling the guy. So I just stood there, sort of frozen, just watching, transfixed. With one knee and a forearm pinning the guy beneath him, Paul bent low and said something into the guy's ear. I couldn't look away. I didn't even want to. I didn't know what the hell was going on, and my own pulse jackhammered through me. I heard sirens coming up the street, and I swear I would have stayed staring if it hadn't been for the cop car that pulled up onto the sidewalk between us. When car doors swung open, I turned and ducked back down the alley to find Gutso and Dwyer. They were waiting near the back, and I ran toward them. "Oh, shit," Gutso said. Another cop car raced past the entrance to the alley behind me. "Oh, shit," Gutso said again. "We have to get out of here now," I hissed. "What the hell happened?" Gutso asked. I looked up at the chain link fence behind us. It was higher than a basketball rim, maybe 15 feet, but climbable. On the other side were the tracks to the commuter rail. "Dude," I said, putting my hands on the fence, "it's your brother. He busted some guy in the store. It's fucking ugly, and we need to get the hell out of here. Now." I started to climb. The tracks, Dwyer asked. Are you crazy? When I got to the top, I looked both ways. No trains. Still, it was probably a high traffic time, so that wouldn't last for long. I dropped one leg on the other side of the fence, swung myself over, and began to climb down. What the fuck, man? Guzzo shouted. No one saw me. No one saw me, I said when I hit the ground. If we get out of here right now, maybe nobody will, and we can all just pretend like we weren't here, like it didn't happen. What happened? Guzzo asked, one hand on the fence, but hesitating. Is Paul okay? Yeah, man, I said. But he just beat the piss out of some kid on the sidewalk, and we don't want to be around to have to answer any questions. It was fucking ugly. Now get over here before a train comes. They hauled ass over the fence, and we ran along the pebble embankment of the railway until we came to the 4th Street Bridge. And then we slid down the embankment to the fence along 4th Street and climbed over that one. I heard a whistle in the distance, but we all made it over and away from the tracks in plenty of time. Paul, Guzzo said again, his voice cracking. It was bad, I admitted. What the hell do you think the kid did? Guzzo asked. I don't know, I said. But whatever he did, your brother just put him in the hospital for it. You know what? Dwyer said. Let's just get a slice and chill. Seriously. It was a good plan. But when we got there, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. I swear I thought about the guy on the ground, but mostly I thought about Paul. Because Paul was Guzzo's older brother. And after my own father died, Paul had basically been my older brother too. And I couldn't shake that look of rage I'd seen on the face of a man I knew and thought of as family. Saturday.